Hello and welcome. UVA Speaks is a podcast of Lifetime Learning, a division of the Office of Engagement at the University of Virginia. Lifetime Learning brings the knowledge and expertise of UVA's faculty and administrators to the university's alumni, friends, and families. My name is Susan Lynch, and I am the Associate Director of Lifetime Learning at the University of Virginia's Office of Engagement. This podcast features Annie Kim, the Assistant Dean for Public Service at the University of Virginia School of Law. She also directs the program in Law and Public Service and the Mortimer Caplin Public Service Center at the law school. Annie is a double who with a BA from the College of Arts and Sciences and a JD from the School of Law. In this podcast, Assistant Dean Kim will talk with us about her position at the law school, careers in public service, and the concept and importance of continuous learning. So thank you, Annie, for speaking with me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Susan. It's a joy to be here. And I appreciate the shout out for being a double who, although in some ways I like to think of myself nowadays as a triple who, since I've been working at UVA for the past 10 years or so. So as all those things, I'm really excited to be part of a series that's designed just for UVA alumni. So thank you for having me.
Well, great. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So can you start and tell us a little bit about your position at the law school? And you mentioned that you wear two hats.
That's right. That's right.
Give us a quick overview of what those are.
Sure. So under my first hat as Assistant Dean for Public Service, I lead the Mortimer Caplin Public Service Center. And it's a team of 5 people in total, along with 3 attorney advisors, me and a 4th person. And so we head up the Public Service Center, and our goal is to help students and alumni who are interested in public service careers figure out what that means and to help them with their career development. The other hat that I wear, which is more recent for me, is as director of the program in Law and Public Service. And that's a curricular program that's designed especially for students who know that they want to go into public service career right away. And so as part of that program, I teach classes and I direct the curricular part of that program and work with students who are part of our fellowship cohort.
Okay, great. So can you dive a little bit deeper and describe the work that you do as director of the Law and Public Service program?
Sure. So I want to start out by saying that this is a very special program at the law school. It was founded in 2009 by none other than Jim Ryan himself, back when he was on faculty and teaching at the law school. So President Ryan at that time realized that it's actually very difficult for students who want to go into public interest work out of law school to go down that path. It is by far a less traveled path. It's much more windy and uncertain. And so in order to be successful at doing that, we need to throw a lot of resources behind those students and help them build community. So that was the impetus for starting the program in Law and Public Service back in the day. And it started out small, and it has grown by leaps and bounds since then. Since I took over the program in June of 2020. And since then, we've had the 2 largest cohorts that we've seen in the program. We just inducted 40 new fabulous fellows, most of whom are first-year students, and they're interested in all kinds of careers. So it's been some great growth there. So in a nutshell, there are a couple of components to the program. We call it LPS for short, for Program in Law and Public Service. And the first part is curricular or academic. And so what we try to do is make law school a little bit more navigable for people who want to focus on public service work. And that just means, broadly speaking, government and nonprofit careers of any kind. And so we help them tailor their academic program and give them advice about how to pursue that goal through their coursework. We put them in touch with faculty mentors. They can get that kind of support as well. And I don't know how many of our listeners know this, but in law school, unlike, say, undergraduate schools or some graduate programs, you don't have to choose a major or concentration in most places. So this is not something that comes in your diploma, but it is a way to create cohesion and structure for your own studies and to make your time at the law school more specialized. And so one of the ways we do this is by having the entire cohort start out together in a founding class. And so in the spring of their 1L year, they all take a seminar together that I teach called Law and Public Service. And that's where we get introduced to all of the different kinds of public service lawyering and many of the trends and hot topics in public service law. And then the same students come back together at the end of their time in law school as 3Ls for another seminar. That's kind of like a capstone for them. And in between those 3 years, they do a lot of work together. They work on service projects. They're on student organizations together. They plan programs for our program together. They put on an annual public service conference, which is fabulous. So they do a lot of things. So that's the curricular side of it. The other side I want to mention is this community component. So I mentioned earlier that it's really hard to go down this little less traveled path alone. And so I think that in any kind of law school like UVA, where there's a strong push to work in a corporate law firm and a lot of success at finding careers in these law firms, it's really hard to go down a different path. And so it's really important for public service students to build that community together and with alumni. We have hundreds and thousands of alumni, actually, who are working in public service, and many of whom are now graduates of the program in law and public service. So we do a lot of events, and we bring a lot of speakers into our classes in the program who have gone down this path and are now working in various kinds of jobs. The other part that's important is also the mentoring that faculty administrators give to our students in public service. And then the final component, which I've already kind of alluded to, is the teaching part. So it's been such a pleasure for me the last couple of years to start going down this path for me personally. This year, for instance, I've taught 3 courses in the program. In the fall, I taught a skills advocacy class. And so this is a much smaller, practical, very hands-on class where the students got to learn some of the basic tools and skills that they'll need as new public interest lawyers, whether it's how to conduct a client interview or to negotiate with an employer or to work on a brief or to think about building coalitions with other nonprofits. So that's a lot of fun. This semester, I'm teaching a class. I mentioned the 1L or the first year seminar where everybody starts together. That's a class that we teach in the spring. And in that class, I actually have the pleasure of bringing back a lot of alumni to speak. So just this week alone, I had 2 different alumni who came back and talked to another class. And that was so much fun. So for instance, I had a public defender who worked for years as a public defender in a state system and is now working with a national nonprofit to help reform and strengthen public defender systems. And last night, in another class that I teach, which is very focused on helping students who are interested in nonprofit work get their foot in the door by doing what's called a postgraduate fellowship. So this class is all about helping them to understand the world in which that works, to research potential projects. And we had another grad who has been working as a legal services attorney and helping families and domestic violence survivors get public benefits in the District of Columbia. So she's been doing that for years. So it's so much fun to bring back these alumni, many of whom I knew as students, and just to see how their careers have taken off.
That's fabulous. So nice to hear that President Ryan was a part of founding that program. That's wonderful. And
Yeah.
so I myself did some work in the domestic violence realm. And so great to hear that shout out to all the folks that are working in that particular piece. So great that they were able to be there for your class. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such important work.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned to me that another piece of what you do is advising students on careers in public service and also with alumni advising sort of career changes. So can you tell us a little bit about what the kind of issues that come up in those sessions?
Yes. There are so many issues, Susan. It's a lot of fun. So I want to acknowledge that I don't really do this alone at all. So we have 3 attorneys in the Public Service Center who actually do the majority of the counseling and the career advising for our students and alumni. I still do some of the alumni advising, but we all come from different backgrounds. My background was local government primarily, and the attorneys in my office have worked in legal aid, death penalty litigation, federal prosecution. So very different career paths. And so what they do is they meet really intensively with individual students and alumni and help them plan pretty much every stage of their career and work through all the issues that they had. So at this point, over 10 years, I've probably met with over 1,000 students and alumni. I have not kept track. And so I don't focus as much on individual advising, but I still meet with alumni, and I love that piece of my job. So we talk about many different issues, many nuts and bolts kinds of issues, like how should I talk about this experience in a cover letter or in a job interview? But I think that I'd say my favorite issues are some of the hardest ones, and they tend to be the ones that go to the core of our identities. And so, for instance, maybe a student or a grad, believes passionately in a certain kind of work and a certain cause or movement, but is this the right one to pursue at this point in time for my career? How do I get there? Am I the kind of person who really wants to spend most of my time working with clients and other people? Or will I thrive better working alone, more on writing and research? Will this job make me happy? What will make me happy? So going just the deep core of the issues, and especially for our folks, where can I do the most good as a public service attorney? What is my true calling? So these are obviously really meaty and hard and important questions to work through, and I love working through them with students and alumni. And another one that comes up quite often is just this is fascinating communications question for me, and it's about how do you communicate something as deeply intimate and personal and complicated as your life dream, like the goals that you've had since you were a kid, maybe. And how do you do that in the space of a few minutes, while talking to a complete stranger over Zoom or in somebody's office? And that's really the job interview. It's a huge communication challenge. It's an interesting challenge. And I think that in order to work through that, we have to be both very self aware and quite vulnerable in ways in order to make that connection with others. So I find that to be a really fun and complex issue to work through with students as well.
That's great that you talk through those kinds of things. We've all been in those places with those job interviews, and how do we navigate all that? So it's wonderful that you can talk through that with everybody. So when we spoke in the pre-recording conversation, you spoke to me about the importance of continuous learning and how that for yourself and in your life and your career. And so I work with the Lifetime Learning Program. Obviously, we certainly agree with that whole concept and idea and the importance of that. Can you share some of your thoughts on the idea of continuous learning or lifetime
Absolutely. First of all, I really love this question. I am a huge
learning?
fan of continuous learning. I could talk about it all day. So thank you for giving me the chance to do that. So I had two thoughts. The first thought I had is this concept of a growth mindset. And this is an idea that was pioneered by the psychologist Carol Dweck. I read her book Mindset several years ago, and it just really transformed the way that I thought about myself, frankly, and about my own tendency toward perfectionism, which I know if you are a UVA alum or a student listening to this podcast, you are probably a high achiever. You probably also have tendencies toward perfectionism, and that comes with the territory. So, what Carol Dweck and other psychologists since then have found is that people can kind of be broken down into two types of believers. So the first is what we call maybe fixed mindset. And those folks believe that basically at birth, by nature, inherently, we possess certain abilities and even passions. And there's not a whole lot we can do to change them. They're part of us, for better or for worse. The second group of people would be considered people who believe in a growth mindset. And that's kind of the opposite. So, no, we do have a certain baseline, but we can actually adapt. We can shape our passions. We can activate our passions and build our skills. And so it's fascinating to think about how the implications of that can play out for young people, especially in their professional development. We were talking about this very concept actually in my class that I mentioned, Law and Public Service, because I think it's so important for how we think about our job choices too. Instead of saying, I'm not good at this, I can't take this kind of job. Well, can you work on that? Can you develop more skills and passions for that? So I think it has a huge impact in so many different ways. So the second thing I wanted to share is that, especially now having been in the workforce for over 20 years, I personally think that finding ways to be a continuous learner throughout your life outside your job is such a huge way and great way to invest your time in your life and to improve your personal joy and the kind of work that you can do with others. So I want to quote a friend of mine who spent decades as a public school educator and a superintendent of school districts, who told me once that he always encouraged his leadership teams to find ways to be a new learner, to be a beginner. Because when you're starting out and you're really pretty bad at something, and you feel awkward and you don't know how to do this thing, you also have a lot of excitement about getting better and just fewer inhibitions, I think, about trying to learn and putting yourself out there. It can also be great, especially if you're older, for building empathy for students and younger people who are learning things for the first time. And it can be another way to spark creativity. So I really love that too. And for me, it's been a long path of trying to learn new things for the last 20 years, it feels like. So just briefly, when I started my career in 1999, I went to work for a large law firm, like a lot of graduates at UVA. And, I was adjusting to firm life and to being an attorney, but I really was hungry for the kind of learning and the kind of atmosphere that I enjoyed as an English major at UVA. And so I started taking graduate classes in the evening at George Mason. I kept doing that. I took classes whenever I could. And then I eventually decided that I wanted to pursue writing more seriously. So I took what's called a low residency Master of Fine Arts program at Warren Wilson College. And I started studying poetry there during my off time and as while I was still practicing as an attorney. So I did that over the course of actually 4 years, I guess. I started working at UVA sometime shortly after that. I kept taking classes. I started playing violin again. So the list just keeps going on and on. Eventually, that led to me writing a couple of poetry books and being a much more serious creative writer outside of work. So all of those things have just enriched my life and just given me just ways to have outlets outside of work. So that's something I really try to encourage my students to also pursue if they can.
Well, you are certainly helping us understand the importance of it, and to go with our curiosity where that takes us, and to be open to new things. It's a great thing for all of us to remember. So as we close, what are some of the final thoughts that you'd like to share about your position at the UVA Law School?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned I've been working for about the past 20 years or so. Law school has really changed a lot in that time. I graduated in 1999, which feels like eons ago, right? And so I think schools like UVA have always been providing a strong education to future lawyers. And, we do an excellent job of getting them ready for, vastly complicated, high level, important careers. But one trend that I've noticed in the past 11 years that I've been here that I am personally so happy about is that we put an emphasis now on what we call experiential learning. And so that just means learning by having job related types of experiences, by practicing professional skills and building them, whether it's in a regular classroom environment with simulations and case studies, or by working with clients at clinics. So when I was a student, we had, I think, 3 clinics. And clinics are places where you can actually have clients that you work with in the community. So that is true service learning. And now we have 24 clinics, if that gives you any sense of the growth in this area. So I couldn't be happier that we have this. And to be part of that program by teaching a skills and advocacy course is just huge for me. Finally, I want to close by saying that, it's been a tough couple of years for most people in this country. It's been a very hard time. And so I have often thought I am so lucky to be at the law school, to be at UVA, and just to be surrounded by students who have this energy to make change, who have that passion, but still also have hope, and the desire to make the world a better place. And that is the kind of thing that helps me to stay hopeful. So I'm so grateful for all of that.
We all need a little bit more hope, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Annie, for sharing this information about yourself and careers in public service and your work at the law school. I think it just gives our alumni, friends, and families so much more information, and great way to think about for themselves, maybe for their children coming up, for their grandchildren who are interested in public service, that UVA law school is a place to be. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun.
Okay, great. And thank you for listening. For upcoming podcasts and other lifetime learning programmings, recordings, and blogs, please visit our website at engagement.virginia.edu/learn. You can also find our podcasts and other recordings on Spotify. Search for the UVA Lifetime Learning channel. So thanks again, and we look forward to you taking part in future lifetime learning programs.